Hello guys, as always, thanks for tuning in. Jay Helmsing here. Welcome to the channel. Today I'm going to bring you another update with Project One Gun. And if you haven't tuned in before, Project One Gun is my Gen 5 Glock 19 that I set out to basically carry, shoot, and compete with for a year straight. That was the initial vision for this gun. And right now we're at about 4 or 5 months in. I think we're approaching the 5-month mark here fairly soon. So around about 4.5 months, I think, to be technically correct. But just to bring you guys some updates and kind of tell you where I'm at with the project and where the project is headed. And you might have seen me post some pictures of other guns and kind of wondered if I'm still doing this project or what's going on with it. And so I have some updates on that front as well. So we'll start out first basically with me carrying this gun. So I have been primarily carrying only this gun. I just don't know that there really is any other compact gun out there that has as much versatility and options available for it as the Glock 19. So it's really hard to knock this gun as a carry option just because the aftermarket loves it. And you can pretty much get any type of holster you want. I carry it usually in a minimalist holster. You can get any type of holster you want. You can get any sort of add-ons you want, really. A lot of different sight options, a lot of different trigger options. Really, whatever you wanted to do to this gun to make it more suitable for your carry needs is pretty easily done because, like I say, the aftermarket just kind of gobbles this gun up. In my criteria for a carry gun, first and foremost is reliability, also accuracy, capacity, things like that also kind of play into it. But to address the first one as far as reliability, with this gun, I've not had any issues at all. I'm now approaching 10,000 rounds through this gun. And it's still got the same recoil spring in it. I haven't swapped that out. I know some people recommend doing that at like 3,000 rounds, which I think is premature for a Glock. But I'm still on the original recoil spring. I really have not replaced any parts. I'm just kind of waiting for something to break. With that said, I've not had any issues. I have had 2 or 3 ammo malfunctions because I tried a different bullet profile that the marksman barrel just didn't care for. This is a slightly tighter chamber in this barrel than you're going to get with previous generation Glocks. It's not quite as loose. I did have a couple issues there. It's my fault. I didn't drop test the ammunition before I went to a competition with it. So I did have a couple bobbles there. I've also had 2 magazine issues, and those were with Magpul magazines, some old dirty Magpul magazines that I just had to kind of burn some ammunition with. I did have some feeding issues with those. And I attribute that to the magazine, and really just nothing I can complain in any way, shape, or form about the gun. It's just it's just faithful. There's really no other way to say it. When you pull that trigger, it's going to fire 99.9% of the time. As far as my own personal maintenance, what I do to maintain this gun, I've not done a detailed strip and clean on it. I don't really tear it down. I don't get into the nitty gritty like some people do. Basically what I do is every 200 or 300 rounds, I kind of wipe it down inside. I get all the carbon that I can see for the most part. Sometimes I tear it down to the connector. I might take that little firing control out and re-lubricate the connector a little bit, put some oil in there, and then just run a bore snake down the bore and call it good. And really just with that simple maintenance, I've not had any issues at all with any sort of reliability or any real change in function. And I'll kind of get into the overview in just a moment. Something interesting that I found about this gun is that while most guns break in over time and get kind of a more smooth trigger, this gun has kind of gone the opposite way, which I noticed with another Gen 5 Glock. Surprisingly, over time shooting it, it's become just a little more notchy. Instead of being more smooth, it seems to be a little more notchy than you'd get out of the box. Out of the box, these Gen 5 Glocks, they just seem to not have a really pronounced wall. You can kind of sweep right through it with the trigger. That wall is definitely back with this gun, and it's just a little more notchy. You don't have that traditional kind of broken in, smooth feeling with the trigger. It's almost the opposite. With that said, it doesn't really affect, shootability or accuracy or anything like that. It's not really that pronounced, but it is just kind of an oddity that I noticed. I should say oddity that I noticed with this gun. Something I thought would be worth pointing out. Now, moving on to the other facets, so as far as a carry gun, it's going to be hard to beat. It really is. Now, do I think that this offers really anything that a lot of the polymer striker fired pistols out there do not offer nowadays as far as reliability and concealability and all that? No, I really don't. I think that this is probably on par You'd be splitting hairs if you ask me, if you look at any of these guns that can fire easily 5,000, 10,000 rounds without having any issues or hiccups. I think that's probably extreme for most shooters, and I think that especially for most concealed carry needs, that's really not something you're probably going to run into too often. So I would say we're well and above any sort of reliability concerns with this, and really probably most other striker fired pistols out there. Just kind of take your pick. We're living in a good time to be a gun owner, I think, because we have so many good options out there. So I think it's probably on par with other guns in that category. Strong aftermarket support, there's no denying that. Like I say, you can get any kind of add-on you want to this gun to kind of modify it, make it unique, make it your own. This gun has really had nothing done to it except for this kind of lime green front sight here, and it's got the agent sights, or correction, not the agent sights. It has the Mariglow Bold sights on it. But other than that, there's really no change, and that's kind of a factory option that you can get, albeit with the orange dot instead of this kind of lemon colored one that I have in mind here. But really no other changes to the gun at all, and it's just been a pretty awesome gun as far as reliability, concealed carry needs, things like that. Something I have noticed with Glocks, and there are a couple other pistols that kind of fall into this category, they seem to carry pretty well because you have this really just kind of flat side here. Now, pros and cons, right? So pro of this is that it does seem to, at least with me, it just kind of seems to bury in my side here, and it has a nice flat profile on this side, which your shirt is going to be right in here. So it just doesn't print very much. It's just an easy gun to kind of conceal and hide that way and not have it print. Downside to it, it probably is just slightly slower to draw because it does right in closer. I know some of the, like you say, the P320 from SIG with a more rounded grip there, it's going to kind of stand off a little bit more. It might print slightly more, be just a little bit thicker through this handle region here, but because of that, it's a little bit easier, it seems like, to kind of wrap your hand around it and get a pretty good strong draw on it. So, we're talking fractions of a second, probably nothing that's really going to add up to anything, but like I say, kind of pros and cons to that more flat profile there. It does seem to carry better, but may not come out of the holster quite as fast as some other guns with a more rounded profile that kind of stands out a little bit more and gives you a little bit more room to kind of get a good grip on before you pull it out of a holster, especially from concealment. Moving on to phase 2, which would be my range sessions. I've consistently reported that my shooting overall has continued to increase and become better on all platforms, even though I'm training primarily with the Glock and the Glock trigger. Now, as you know, the Glock trigger is fairly unique to Glock. It's not a fantastic trigger. It's definitely more than suitable for your striker fired needs, but it's definitely nothing like a P320 trigger or a Walther PPQ trigger or anything like that. They're just different feel, different take up, different break angles, different grip circumference, all kinds of different differences that you're going to have to notice when you really get into it and spend a lot of time on the platform. So I was kind of worried to see if it would polarize me, and if shooting like my Berettas, my SIGs, anything like that would have an adverse effect on putting a lot of time in with this gun. So if I would be losing anything, in other words. And I found that it just doesn't happen, at least with me. Now, of course, sample size 1. I just might be lucky, or maybe I have kind of a different setup, because I've kind of grown up shooting a large variety of guns, not really staying to one platform or anything like that necessarily. But with that said, as far as being a range gun, it's going to be pretty hard to beat, I think. Like I say, it just seems to transfer with me. I can pick this gun up and I know where it's going to break and where the reset's going to be, and it's a very predictable gun to shoot. And then I can, with my Duty P320, it's a different trigger feel, it's a different break, it's a different staging that I have to do, but it's not like a big growing pain or anything for me to adapt to that other platform. So I think that, you could easily do this. You could easily find a gun that you wanted to use as your range hammer and just go do that. And it would kind of transfer to whatever else you wanted to carry or whatever else you had on duty. I really don't know that it's very critical that we stay with the same exact guns that we're going to shoot, and keep from rotating platforms, which I know some people do and some people believe in that. Had an interesting discussion about that, and most people, I talk to different people. Some people say, well, I carry a P320 on duty, so that's what I'm going to train with, just to kind of get the muscle memory, just down pat and not have any any issues. I've heard some people say they got really good at shooting after they started mixing up platforms because they started learning different triggers and kind of learning how to read the gun, if you will. So, a lot of different trains of thought out there. And then there are some that are looking for, the conversation I had, the guy seemed like he was looking for just fractions of a second. And, when you get into the high level of competition, which I'm nowhere near, when you're looking for those fractions of a second, you start looking at dynamics and moving in and out of positions and things like that. Probably is a little more critical that you start spending a lot more time on your gun to just shave those fractions of a second down. When you look at me and how I compete, which we'll get into in just a moment, I still bobble things. I still have, bad reloads, bad draws sometimes. I still have all kinds of mechanic issues that I could work through that would take me years to perfect and years to get on the proficiency level of some of the high-end shooters. So it's not really in the cards for me. I'm more still of a combat tactical style shooter. I'm not really, I don't really try to game the USPSA matches and things like that to the level that some people do. For me, it's just training for, gun handling and just overall shooting and things like that. So, that's kind of a one and the same. I think you could just use really any gun you wanted to if you were more comfortable with that, using that at the range, and I think you would develop skills that would transfer to other guns. And I think a lot of that is because you have kind of a baseline to go from. So if I'm shooting this gun and I know what my par times are for that gun for that drill, I can see myself increase, and I can kind of know where to turn the wick up and things like that by staying with one gun at the range. And I think that working on your own, development as a shooter is probably much more important than, working on like how to manipulate the gun or how to, transfer between different platforms and things like that. And I have a tendency, I think we all do, if you do that a lot, to kind of start blaming the gun. Like, well, I'm kind of rusty on handling this gun, so it must be the gun. Maybe I should just switch up and try a different gun, or I need a longer sight radius, or whatever excuse we could make up that day. But just something to think about there. I think a lot of that is just finding a gun that you like to shoot at the range and kind of developing with that gun. Developing yourself as a shooter more so than just trying to change the gun or throw parts at it or do something like that. And I think that's probably a lot of the benefit that I'm seeing there, is just spending more time working on me instead of working on the gun itself. Last phase we'll talk about is the competition aspect. So I have been to a few competitions now with this Glock 19. Very uncommon to see very many people shooting a compact size gun, at least in most of your serious competitive circles. You get into some IDPA and some carry gun shooting and things like that, where the Glock 19 is a little more commonplace. But even there, you're going to have the people who game it, and some of the rules are like can be concealed in a holster, and people will definitely bring in the P320X5 or something because they have an inside the waistband holster for it, and it'll fit in their pants. Now, is it realistic to what most people will carry? Probably not. I see most people carrying shields and the SIG P365 and things like that. Glock 43s, you don't see those really in competition. So you definitely have some people gaming that idea. But some people do go and shoot competition with the Glock 19. Now, with a compact size gun, in competitive shooting, I feel like you definitely are limiting yourself, and for a few reasons. So first way you're limiting yourself is that you have less weight on that slide. So at least for me, this is a fairly light gun, which makes it awesome for carry. However, I don't have that extra heft out over the barrel. So, recoil is definitely manageable, don't get me wrong. But comparing this to like a Glock 34, the 34 is just going to track better for me. This slide just kind of whips back and will, track right back really fast. And it's pretty easy for me to kind of tame it the way I grip the gun. But it is, it's going to have more abrupt movement, if you will, out of the slide as far as that's concerned, compared to like a Glock 34, where you're getting that extra inch or so of barrel length and slide weight and everything out over the front there. So, those guns seem to track a little bit better for me, and I think that helps a lot on follow-up shots. I think you're giving up a little bit there. Accuracy-wise, you're definitely losing a little bit on the more complex shots because you don't have that sight radius. So in shooting like that, where it's a long distance shot or it's something that you really need to take your time and kind of develop that sight picture, these are not going to be nearly as precise as like a set of fiber optic sights on a Glock 34 would be. So you're giving up a little bit there, and obviously carrying. I do have some fiber optic sights that I carry with, but I prefer probably these brightly colored luminescent dots and things like that for more of a carry gun or a combat sight picture. So yeah, you're giving up just a little bit having, I think, this gun be your competition gun. And to test that theory, actually, last night, I went to a USPSA match and I shot my Wilson Combat Beretta 92 Brigadier. And I was just kind of, obviously the stages weren't the same, but the month before I shot this in competition, I wasn't all that happy with my results. And so I wanted to see if just changing the gun up to a more competition style, competition oriented, full size service pistol, more, heavier slide, things like that would make much of a difference. And for me, it did make a pretty good difference. And that's coming from me shooting a lot of striker fire and really kind of neglecting to some degree my single action, double action guns. That's going into a single action, double action gun with tremendous trigger. But, my manipulations were very rusty with that gun. Reloads were slower than they would be with this gun just because I've practiced it, different things in that aspect, but I still shot faster and I still shot more accurately than I did the match before with this gun. So, it just goes to show you, I guess, proof positive, first off, that getting good with a gun is going to transfer to other guns, but also that, in competition and things like that where you're kind of looking for those fractions of a second, anything kind of helps. So you kind of want to put that momentum in your favor. So as far as this being a good competition gun, nah, not really, hands down. And I would say that would apply to any compact size gun, the P320 compact, anything like that. You're going to be giving something up in the way of, recoil management, the way the slide tracks, and also in your sight picture here, especially with the, shorter sight radius, unless you're using like a carry optic or something like that, which you don't really have to worry about the sight radius, but still the other two things with gun handling come into play. Longer barrel just seems to me, for me at least, to track a lot better, a lot easier going from target to target. Obviously a lot less radius and things like that to worry about, just a little degree off here or there, and some of these shorter guns can really, make a big difference on the target end. So, just some things to think about that I've noticed with this gun. I would not recommend it as your competition gun. I think you're going to get more out of, setting a dedicated gun up or having a dedicated gamer style gun if you really want to get into competition and shooting that gun. So, it kind of leads me to the way that I shoot. And again, I'm not nearly as competitive as some people are. I don't go out there and contest points and all that kind of stuff, get in arguments. I don't game the stages. I don't, do a whole lot of ghost gunning or anything like that. I do it mostly just for training and, extra reinforcement for training. So, even with my slightly less competitive approach to competition shooting, I feel like there's something to be gained from a different gun. So, if you're really into it, if you really want to make those classes and things, I think you'll definitely be along those same viewpoints and wavelengths when you get into that style of stuff. Or maybe if you're kind of on the fence about going down to one gun. Now, as far as the future of Project One Gun, I've decided, basically, you guys commented on the last video, I'm going to pull the plug. So it's not going to be a full year's worth, but I have committed to do at least half a year, so at least 6 months. Now that's going to end basically at the turn of the year because I started this first thing in July, so very early July, right around, actually I think I was carrying it before then, and then in July is when we officially started the whole rundown. So, 6 months will be up in, at the turn of the year. In 2 weeks, I do have a Glock operators course I'm going to. So at that course alone, I'm going to be firing 1,000 rounds through this gun. So there will be some more, tests of this gun for sure. I will continue to carry it, but obviously I'm kind of peppering that in with trying some other guns. So I am going to the range and shooting some other, like some optics and things like that, just to see if, I'm still continuing to find that the development that I get with this gun transfers to other platforms. And as far as I've tested it, it's absolutely true. These obviously being iron sights, I can go to an optic gun and I really don't have much of a learning curve. It's still very familiar to me, even if it's like my P320 RX. So, I will continue to kind of pepper in those other guns at the range and kind of see if that is true or not. The last thing I'd like to leave you with, the big idea here was to try to simplify my life a little bit and to kind of cut down a little bit on, I guess, switching platforms, going from gun to gun, make my life more simple, things like that. I've really found kind of the opposite here. So there's a happy medium at some point, and I believe with one gun you're not going to get that happy medium. So you're going to be missing things. In other words, you're going to be going to competitions and wishing you had a Glock 34 with fiber optic sights and like a 3.5 pound connector, or magwell or whatever you want to do. You're going to be going to the range maybe, and sometimes you might be like, man, I wish I had a Glock 17 because that's exactly what I carry on duty, but I've only got my Glock 19, so I'm kind of not really training as proficiently as I might be able to, or something along those lines. So at this point, I kind of feel like the ideal way to do this is to find a gun you like and maybe have 2 or 3 guns. And, along with that, maybe have some guns to kind of mix it up. I have a Glock 45, not the Glock 45, but it's a Glock 30 that shoots 45 ACP that I do shoot once in a while as well, just to kind of mix it up and get me used to different recoil impulses and things like that. I've got, hammer-fired guns because obviously that's a very common platform out there. And there are several different types, and I like shooting hammer-fired guns as well. So, staying proficient on those. You don't need a lot of different guns. You just need a few that you really like to shoot. And I think then you're probably going to be able to get both the rewards of, consistent work, repeatable work on a platform, as well as that variety that you kind of need, and mixing the platforms up once in a while, and shooting different platforms for different purposes and things like that. So my ideal kind of minimalist design now would be probably 2 or 3 guns, and using them for different purposes. Maybe having a more dedicated carry gun where you're not running into some of the issues that I had with heating this up at the range, trying to carrying it back dirty, keeping track of my hollow point ammunition versus my ball ammunition, all that kind of crazy stuff. Rechambering rounds over and over and over again that you're going to carry, that creates bullet setback and all kinds of dangerous conditions. So, maybe a dedicated carry gun and a few different range guns, or maybe a dedicated carry gun, a competition gun, and then, a good range gun in the middle there, or something like that, I think would probably be the ideal circumstance to minimize your life and stay away from the whole switching up guns too much thing, but also keep you well-rounded as a shooter. So anyway, hope this kind of synopsis has made sense. And again, almost 10,000 rounds with this gun. Will be over 10,000 rounds at the 6-month point, which is where I'm going to pull the trigger, just because I'm getting kind of diminishing returns. I'm not finding out anything that I didn't find out in the first 3 months. So again, guys, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for sticking with me. And as always, continue to practice your craft. Continue to get out there, learn as much as you can, and kind of plant those seeds and learn where you can from everybody. Even if it's somebody that you don't like too much, there's probably something you can learn, or at least you can learn to stay away from, right? So again, thanks for tuning in, guys. I really appreciate it. Until next time, Jay Helmsing.